There are high emotions, as you will know. On your way in here, there was a bit of a confrontation between you and another Labour MP, John Mann. I think we can show a bit of it.
Over the top, you Nazi apologist. You Nazi apologist. Rewriting history. Rewriting history. Rewriting history. Go back and check what Hitler did. Go back and check what Hitler did. There's a book called Mein Kampf. You've obviously never heard of it. Written in 1925. Yes, you've never read it. You're looking at that. You don't look at that. Hitler did in 1932.
I've been a journalist since 1973. I have never heard an MP call a fellow MP a Nazi apologist, a Labour MP to a Labour former Mayor of London, former Labour MP yourself, Labour activist, chair of a commission. Nazi apologist.
I mean, he went completely over the top. Actually, I was doing a radio interview at the time. He's bellowing that I'm a racist and anti-Semitic in my ear. But I've had that with John Mann before. A few weeks ago, screaming that I was, bigot down the phone.
What do you make of this, Nick Clegg?
Well, can I just... I had understood that the reason why Labour MPs are calling for you to resign is not because you've defended Naz Shah, but because you've reportedly said something about Hitler's approach to Zionism in the 1930s. Is that right?
When he didn't win the election, became the largest party in 32. His policy then was not to kill the Jews; it was to deport them all to Israel.
So this is the bit I have to say.
But is it a fact
I'm
or
as shocked.
not?
I'm as shocked as you are. In all my years in politics, I've never seen the sort of perverse logic which starts throwing Hitler and a rewriting of history into an incredibly sensitive debate. I mean, what possesses you to talk about Hitler and your views of his approach to Zionism, given what happened, given the genocide, given the sensitivities around the Jewish community here and around the world? And look, of course everybody defends your right and everybody's right to be critical of the Israeli government. But this, I think there is, and by the way, I'm not going to be totally sanctimonious. My party, we've had issues. When I was a leader, I've had to suspend people of the Liberal Democrats.
You only suspended one for 3 months, and he was...
and others have left.
Said many terrible things.
But setting that aside, the point is this. There is something at the moment, I think Julian Neuberger said this last night, and she's right. There is something on parts of the left in British politics at the moment that enter into an incredibly intellectually contorted justification for starting to link Hitler and modern politics.
Colleagues think you're part of that.
No, I mean, the simple truth, you go back and check, that was Hitler's policy when he first came to power, to move Germany's Jews to Israel.
So that's all right then?
No, I denounce that.
So why would you bother raising the point?
I'm being questioned in an interview. I answer the question. You've never known me not answer a question you put to me.
No,
and I'm not going to lie.
I'm grateful.
I'm not going to go on. I'm not going to come on and say...
I don't understand what... Because by 1940, Adolf Eichmann wanted to forcibly remove them to Madagascar. Now we have a Labour MP saying they should be forcibly removed to America. I don't understand what the point is.
Well, I'm asked a question, I answer it. You've never known me not to answer the questions you put to me.
Ken,
the simple truth is that was Hitler's policy in 32 when he came to power.
You're a household name. A lot of people know you around the country, right? You are part, whether you like it or not, of mainstream politics. I never, ever thought I'd see the day that mainstream, well-known politicians like you would start raking over Hitler's views in a way that people would simply not understand. I mean,
things are either historically true or they're not.
You're not an academic historian.
No, that's one of the reasons I pursue the policies I do, is I do study history. Because if you study history, you can avoid making the same mistakes again.
But you're also a politician who's also responsible for choosing your words carefully and not entering into this weird, I think, contorted maze which allows you to start talking about Hitler in the same breath as the Jewish community in Britain today. I mean, it's an extraordinarily contorted approach.
What about political comparisons, though? Isn't that the problem, as Nick Clegg says? Why do you use the Holocaust as a political comparison to somehow highlight your objection to the Israeli government? That's what offends people.
My objection to the Israeli government is that for nearly 70 years, the
Palestinians
have been kept in appalling conditions.
But why do you use the Holocaust and Hitler to underline that point?
I'm not making any link between the current Israeli policy and the Holocaust or Hitler. I was asked a question in an interview, I answered it. It happens to be a historical fact. If you say to me, is it true we were invaded by the Normans in 1066, I'm going to say yes, because it's true. And I'm not going to avoid answering the truth.
Right, I think we can speak to the Labour MP, John Mann. You will have seen John Mann and Ken Livingstone having a confrontation in the clip we showed a little earlier. John Mann, we've been speaking to Ken Livingstone. We showed your remarks. Mr Livingstone says you were over the top in calling him a Nazi apologist.
Well, he's a Nazi apologist, and he's a worse historian than he is a politician. He's factually inaccurate. He ought to read Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. He ought to study what the Nazis did, including when Hitler came to power in January 1933. He ought to look at the events of that year. He ought to see what the first, second, third thing that Nazi regime did, who it targeted and why. He ought to look at what he and his political leaders said about Zionism, and then he should reconsider why he's said these hugely offensive, grotesque remarks. The timing is calculated and offensive as well. He should not be sat on Labour's National Executive Committee. He should be suspended today.
Right. Ken Livingstone, what do you say to that?
Well, I'd simply say to John Mann, go back and check. Is what I said true or not? And the BBC, you've got a huge team of researchers. It will take just an hour or two to go back.
But what's the point?
But
what's the point?
Because I was asked a question, I answered it. I have never, in 41 years since I won my 45 years since my first election, I have never lied. I've always answered the question.
But you seem to be implying that, and by the way, I don't think it's entirely historically accurate, because they'd already started attacking the Jews when he came to power, and Kristallnacht followed not long afterwards as well.
But it wasn't an attack to say he was going to deport all the Jews.
But you always seem to be implying that, oh, well, he wasn't such a bad guy because he just wanted to deport them all, but he only went wrong later on. No. I mean, people will think it's unbelievable what they're hearing in British politics today.
He was a monster from start to finish, but it's simply the historical fact. His policy was initially to send all of Germany's Jews to Israel, and there were private meetings between the Zionist movement and Hitler's government that were kept confidential, only became apparent after the war, when they were having a dialogue about whether or not to do this.
Right. I mean, John Mann, do you think Ken Livingstone is anti-Semitic?
Yes, he is, and his rewriting of history, well, he's factually wrong. Hitler was not a Zionist. Hitler blocked any attempt to get Jews into what was then Palestine, and the reason he did so, and he said so, and it was express, was because a Zionist state would be an international Jewish conspiracy and a base for it. Right. He said it in Mein Kampf, and it was said, indeed, his foreign minister specified that in great detail in 1937, outlining why they weren't prepared to allow Jews who they wanted to get rid of to leave to go to what was then Palestine, because it would have created this power base for an international Jewish conspiracy. Hitler was not a Zionist, and to suggest so is so grotesque. It's calculatedly offensive. I think you've lost it, Mr Livingstone. I think you need some help. It's a deliberate, calculated attempt to cause problems, to stir up hatreds. What are you on at the moment?
Right.
You certainly shouldn't be on Labour's National Executive.
I mean, do you understand how those remarks, you say you're telling the truth, but how they would upset a whole community, how they would upset people who lived, survived or died during the Holocaust, to be used in any sort of comparison today?
What John Mann just said isn't true. I've not said that Hitler was a Zionist. What I said was his policy in 1932 was to deport Germany's Jews to Israel. That doesn't say I agree with it.
But you said it earlier today. Are you withdrawing that?
I never said it.
Are you withdrawing it?
What I said was that was his policy. It was followed by private conversations between the Zionist leadership and Hitler's government about whether to carry out that policy. He didn't.
I invite you
Is this edifying for the Labour Party?
That you are raising these points about the early 1930s at a time when the party faces a crisis of anti-Semitism in its own ranks. But people will be baffled that this is what you're doing, Ken.
I'm not raising these points. I was going to plan to have a nice quiet morning in the garden until suddenly I'm descended on by all these journalists saying, is this true, is that not true? Well, I'd be much happier just to do the gardening. So well, listen, nice day out
at least, which can't be said of all politicians, you've been here and you've answered the questions. And
you can't say that all politicians.
And that's exactly what I did say. We can't say that of all. And we're grateful for that. People will make up their own minds about what you're saying, and we'll let you go back to your garden.
John Mann, thank you, if you're still there.
Thank you.
Now,